I've got 40 of the most popular vocal microphones sitting right in front of me, and what I want to do today is rank them on a tier list from S to F. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to give you my opinion about each mic. A little caveat, I have used every single microphone on this list. I've been producing professionally now for almost a decade. I've done thousands of songs. I've used so many microphones, so I do feel like I will have pretty good insight on these. But before we actually rank them, I want to show you the tier list. We are going from S to F, so top, bottom, and what we're going to do is we're going to rank them on overall sonic quality. Obviously, the better sound a microphone is, the higher it's going to be ranked. But then there's other factors that will come into play, like value. I feel like that's the only way to rank, microphones that are $150 versus a microphone that's like $16,000. And then also like flexibility and versatility. So I want microphones that work on tons of different vocal styles. I want mics that'll work on stuff like acoustic guitar. We're not going to look at necessarily like drum microphones in this video. This is specifically vocal mics, but every studio that has a vocal mic should be able to pop it on guitar or tambourine or a male vocalist, a female vocalist, a rock song, a hip-hop song. So we're going to rank on all of those caveats, but let's actually dive in because we have a ton to get through. There are 40 different mics. So I guess we'll start with something really simple. We're going to start with the JZ Black Hole 2. This microphone retails for $1,000, but a lot of the time they'll do their deals where you can get this mic like half off. And I think at $500, this mic is a great value. In terms of sonic quality, I've used this mic a ton. It's super bright. It is a bit scooped. I think it kind of does something similar to what you would hear in like a Manley Ref, but since it's not tube, it does have a little bit of that brittleness. So at the value, I would say if it's $1,000, it would be at the very, very high end of C. But for $500, this is easily going in B. So I'm going to rank it B. I'm going to try to arrange these categories even from best to worst within that. So if we have 8 different B microphones, they should still go from my favorite to the least favorite. So right now, we're going to put it right in the middle of B. JZ Black Hole 2, great microphone. Again, if you can get it at half off, I think it's a super, super good steal. But the next one that we're going to go to is the Avantone CV12. This has been a super popular microphone for a very long time. There's a bunch of lore that Taylor Swift used this mic on her first couple records when she was working out of Nashville. I think that this is a great kind of entry-level vocal microphone. I think that especially for the price, I believe it's $400. It's pretty versatile. I think it is going to be a big upgrade from some of the less expensive stuff that we'll talk about in just a minute. And for this one, I think that I'm going to rank this as a high B. At $400, I like the sonic characteristics. It is bright. It can get a little bit spitty, but it's a pretty solid microphone. We'll get right back to ranking, but I did want to take a quick second to let you know, if you're not already subscribed, feel free to subscribe. We do videos like this every single Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And if you enjoy this video, please drop a like and a comment. It helps us out a ton. If you want to support the channel, you can head over to makepopmusic.com. We have a ton of free content over there. We have free samples, free presets. We have tons of PDFs. We have DAW templates, but we also have paid content. We have whole sample packs. We just dropped a new Serum preset pack for Serum 2 called Poptopia 2. We have courses, tons of stuff over there, and checking out our website is the best way to support our channel. But let's get back to ranking. The next one that we're going to talk about is the JZ. I believe this is the Vintage 11. For me, the Vintage 11 is a bit darker than something like the Black Hole 2. I think that it does kind of lean into the namesake a little bit, and it does give you a little bit more of a vintage vibe. But for $900, I think that's a little bit steep. If it's half off for $450, I do like it. For my own taste, I don't use this nearly as much as I would something like a Black Hole 2 or an Avantone CV12, since it is kind of a sonic signature that I don't dive into a ton. So I'm going to rank this far down on B if it's at its sale price. If it's not at its sale price, I'm probably putting this in C as well. But we'll pop it right here for now, kind of right in the middle. And the next one that we're going to talk about, this is the MXL. I believe it is the V67. This microphone is super, super affordable. It's a lot of people's first mics. But with that said, I actually think that there are a lot of different mics in this price range that work a bit better. I think that you're going to run into issues with sibilance. I think that the low end on a mic like this is really strange and boxy and woofy. This is not a microphone that I would really recommend. Even if you have a limited budget, I'll give that recommendation a little bit later. But for right now, I'm actually going to put this in the D. I actually don't really ever like this microphone, and I would suggest just looking at other options in that price range. The next one that we're going to go to is about the polar opposite of that. We have the Sony C800G. This is actually my vocal microphone of choice in my studio right now. it is super, super pricey. When I bought mine was not nearly $17,000. At $17,000, I think that brings it down to A. If you can find one used, or if you were to get one when it was $10,000, $11,000, I think it's an S tier microphone. So for what I purchased the mic at, I'm going to put it in S tier. It's one of my favorite microphones ever. There's only going to be a couple S tier mics in this entire list. And for me, I feel like the Sony C800 is just something that every major studio should have on hand. It's super bright. It's almost got this natural compression. It is a tube microphone, so you get a ton of detail, but it doesn't have that super warm, boxy low end that you're going to hear in a lot of tube microphones. To me, this is like the golden standard of a pop mic, a hip hop mic, an R&B mic. This is my go-to for every session. I still haven't found a singer that sounds bad on this mic. So while yes, it is pricey, I think it is just about the best microphone that you could buy. So that is going in S. We'll try to rank some more budget options up here. I know it seems crazy that obviously there's a $17,000 mic in S and all of these other mics are down here, but I promise we'll fill up this A tier and maybe even this S tier in just a bit. The next one is the Aston Spirit/Origin. I believe there's two microphones that have the same capsule. There's a more budget-friendly one that doesn't have polar patterns or like octave filters or anything like that. So if you want the budget option, that's also possible. I actually think that this is a really good mic for the price. This is one that I would say probably is going at the top of B tier. For this price, I would probably pick this over all of these mics. This is to me what I would picture when I say somebody get like an entry-level microphone. I don't think the entry-level should be so budget-friendly that you're always kind of fighting with it and hating it. But I understand that not everybody has, $700, $800, $1,000 to spend on a microphone. So we'll rank the Aston right here. I feel pretty good about that. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Rode NT2. I've had a long history with Rode microphones. When I was in high school, I had a couple friends that had these, the NT1 and the NT2. These are just, I really, 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 really dislike the sonic signature of these. And let me remind myself how much this NT2 is. Yeah, $419. I think that this is not a good sounding mic. I think that Rode has done a really, really good job with marketing. I will never, ever find myself reaching for a Rode mic, even if I'm sub $500. I'm going for the Avantone. I'm going for some of the other options that we'll talk about over here. And even if I'm going like 200 and below, like the NT1 that we'll talk about, I'm probably going to look for other options. I do not like the sonic signature. I think they sound really cheap. I think that the top end is super brittle. And to be honest, I think you might be better off just like using your iPhone microphone. So I know that seems really, really harsh, but I feel like so many people getting into the game buy this mic. And I feel like it is not the quality that it should be for the price. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Manley Ref C. This microphone is great. I believe for a while it was the Katy Perry microphone of choice. You'll see this in a lot of studios. To me, this kind of does something similar to the Sony C800 where it's super bright, it's really open. It is definitely like a present forward microphone, but I don't think it's nearly as smooth as a C800G. Again, it is like a third or a fourth of the price depending on how prices fluctuate. So for that, I think it's a great microphone. I think it does what this does good. It's just not quite as smooth. It will need a little bit more DS. It will need a little bit more finesse with something like some tube EQ just to smooth it out a bit. But the Manley Ref C is a great mic. It's been used on a ton of massive records. I think the build quality is really, really good. A lot of people love the aesthetic. It's not my taste. I actually prefer silver microphones outside of something like the C800. But I think it's a great mic. I'm going to pop it in A tier for now. The next one that we have is the Soyuz. I believe this is the 017. This is a tube version. I have used this mic. This is a tube mic that kind of sits in the opposite direction of something like a C800. I think that it could just be the way that it looks, but on every source I've ever used, it's definitely a bit fuller, a bit warmer, a bit more vintage. And so for that, I'm going to pop it in B. I think for the price, I actually might pop it in C for me personally, because for the price, I think there's a lot of other options that I'm going to grab on this list. We're approaching $5,000. That is super expensive for a microphone. And for me, the sonic signature is just not something that I'm reaching for very, very often. So I'm going to pop it right down here. But let's dive into the next one. Here we have the Warm 87. This mic is $700. You're probably going to see a theme on this list of me with different Warm audio gear. I'm not a big Warm audio fan at all. Everything that I've tried from them, they're all clone-based, which I'm cool with companies having clones. I think to build a whole company off of only doing clones, they have to be very, very, very good. And I feel like they used to be more affordable. I feel like their prices have gone up. For $700, there are so many other microphones that I would use. I find that Warm Audio, the build quality is not always there. I do find that they've had a lot of issues with like quality control. I've had so many friends that purchase Warm gear that comes in just completely either broken or the wiring is done really, really sloppy. And this is not to disparage them at all. This could just be my personal experience, but I don't love most Warm stuff. And even if it was a, great made mic, I don't think that the sound quality is good. For $700, I think that there are so many better options on the market. I think that their branding and their marketing is really, really good. I think that they make their microphones look like prestige microphones. So if you walk into a studio, they feel like, oh, this person has, a U87 or a U67. But they don't sound anything like it. I've never found a Warm clone that I think sounds even halfway close to what it's supposed to be. So for that, I'm going to rank it in D. We can kind of follow it up right here. I believe this is the Warm U47. This is the Junior, so this one's $299. For me, at the price point, I can move it up to C. I think that $299, it's a solid sounding microphone. I think that if you're going to get a Warm mic, I think definitely just go ahead and get something super, super budget friendly, because at that point, you are going to compete with some of the other build quality of $200, $300 mics, where something like that $700 mic, that's not really competing with other $700 mics in my opinion. And then the next one that we have is the Warm 800, or I think they call it the 8000. Damn, they have this thing priced at $1,300, and for that, I'm going to rank it in F. I actually don't think that this sounds anything like a C800, and what I've found is with C800 clones, they don't do what the C800 does, which is super, super bright, but not overly sibilant and not overly harsh and spitty. I think that when you're making a microphone that's going to try to do that C800 thing, if you don't really, really, really have the top end dialed in, it becomes the most brittle, overbright, sibilant mic that you could ever use, and I don't think that their clone has done a good job of replicating the top end. I also don't think the mids are nearly as detailed. I think that they're trying to do, the look on the back here with something like this cooling unit. I don't know if their engineering is actually working the same as the Sony. The Sony has so much engineering going in it, it would not be able to be replicated for $1,300. There are other C800 clones on the market. There used to be one from Golden Age that was like $5,000. That one actually sounded really, really solid, and I think it's because there's so many components in that mic that it is just not a cheap mic to make. So when you're trying to get it for $1,300, I don't think it really sounds similar at all. I think it's a lot of money to spend for something that should be a clone, and I think that there are so many other microphones in that $1,500 and under range that I would rather you spend your money on. So that's where I'm going to put that one for now. The next one that we have is the Telefunken 251. This might be the most popular microphone of all time, and for this is actually going at the top of my S tier. Yes, I have a C800. However, if I were to get another kind of prestige level mic, it's going to be the 251. I think it is the most versatile mic ever made. It sounds good on literally every source I've ever heard it on. Male vocals, female vocals. You can brighten it up for pop music. You can, mellow it out for something like jazz. You can use it for room mics on drums. You can use it for percussion. You can use it on acoustic guitar. I think that this mic is probably the most well-made microphone ever. I think Telefunken has really knocked it out of the park. They're so hard to get. The reason that I went with the C800 over the 251, if you're wondering why I'm singing its praises so much, is because I kind of had a feeling that prices were going to raise on the C800 a bit more than the 251. And for me, the C800s are a little bit harder to get. So when I had the opportunity to purchase one, I went with that. However, I will be getting a 251 eventually. I think it is the perfect microphone for basically every source that you could apply it to. You'll see some 251 clones down here too that we'll talk about. The next thing is the Rode NT1. I'm going to rank this at the bottom of D. I talked a bit about Rode and the sound quality and the build quality earlier. I think that these mics, they feel like plastic. The packaging is really, really cheap. The construction is really cheap. But I can't rank this one an F because it is a much more affordable microphone. I believe this one's $150. Oh, it's $250. All right, well, we're going to stay at the bottom of D. But $250, we're getting to the point where I could probably name 5 other microphones I would recommend you buying. Again, not a big Rode fan personally. I know it's so many people's first microphones. I think that they've really reached the market. I don't think that it is a good choice for a first mic. We'll dive into something that is a bit more of an upgrade. This is the Lauten LA320. And this, to me, this is going at the top of an A tier. So this mic, I think, should be everybody's first tube microphone. I think that the LA320 is probably the best microphone that's under $2,000, maybe even $2,500 on this entire list. I've stacked this up against, Telefunkens, not the 251, but some of the other, like copper Telefunkens. I've stacked it up against some of the Neumanns. I've stacked it up against other entry-level tube microphones, the Vanguards. I actually think that for this mic, $700 is an insane steal. I think that they could charge $1,500 for this mic easily, and I would be happy paying for it. It is such a good mic. Every mic shootout that we've ever done, this ranks right behind the C800. Everybody, when we did our last ranking, said C800 number 1, 320 number 2. And that was above other $4,000, $5,000 microphones. So this mic is absolutely insane. It might be the best value on the entire tier list. And if you're looking for a good versatile tube microphone that's not overly textured, not overly colored, this is going to be my choice. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Universal Audio Bach 251. I think that this is a great clone. We're going to talk about a poor clone later, but for this one, this is one of the rare times that I will put a clone in A. I think that at under half the price, this one does a really good job of doing what the 251 does. I think that the mic in that like enamel mint green is a beautiful, beautiful microphone. I think that while it's not exactly a 251, even if they remove that branding from it, I think it's a beautiful sounding microphone. I think it is one of the better things that Universal Audio has made hardware-wise. And for me, $5,000 is still a ton of money for a microphone. However, it does sound like a $5,000 microphone, unfortunately. Let me just make sure that that is the price before I keep $4,000. For $4,000, I'm moving it above the Manley Ref. Like, we're talking $500 more. I think it is a much better microphone. For me personally, I think it's a bit smoother. I think it's a bit more open. It's a beautiful, beautiful mic. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Lauten Audio LS208. It's actually what I've been speaking into this entire video. For me, it's my favorite top address microphone. It is a condenser. However, I use it in place of something like a Shure SM7b a ton, just with it being top address. I think that the frequency response is great. I don't use it for vocals a ton. I find that it is a little bit close off in the high mids for vocals, but I love it on acoustic guitar. I love it on guitar cabinets. I love it just as a voiceover or dialogue mic. So for that, I'm actually going to pop this right in the middle of B. It's not the most versatile Lauten that I have, and I think at $500, I would just say either up your price for the 320 if you want a vocal mic, or you could lower your price and save a little bit of money and get something like the Lauten Audio LA220. And I'm also going to put this in A tier because at its budget, I think that this is the best vocal microphone under $1,000 other than the 320. And I know it sounds like I'm a Lauten Audio fanboy. I know I have a lot of their gear. I've worked with them a ton in the past, but this is completely unsponsored, unbiased. I think that at $300, $400, this microphone sounds better than basically any other microphone. I think it sounds better than all of the Warm clones. I think it sounds better than some of the more expensive Audio-Technica stuff that we'll talk about. I think it sounds better than a 414. This microphone is beautiful. I cannot recommend it enough. If you're buying your first vocal microphone, this is the mic that I would recommend time and time and time again, the Lauten Audio LA220. Speaking of Audio-Technica, we have the 2020 right here. When I was coming up, this was everybody's first microphone. It was either this or the Rode NT1A. In the rock and metal scene, the 2020 and the 4040 were huge. I believe that like Joey Sturgis was using them on a ton of massive records. And I actually think for the price, I think this is kind of an excellent microphone. I would choose it over the MXL. I would choose it over all of the Rode stuff. I might even choose it over the cheaper Aston. For me, I'm actually going to put this mic in B tier because for its price, I think that this mic is an incredible value. I don't think that it is as good as something like a 220 or something like the Aston probably. However, it's a third of the price. Like at its price, what is this right now? $119. I think every studio could easily grab this. If you want to get into production, I think that this is an excellent first mic. It is a little bit bright. It is a little bit thin, but I think that it takes EQ better than a lot of other budget mics on this list. And the next one that we're going to talk about is the 4040. This is also by Audio-Technica. This mic is $330. And for me, I think it does sound a little bit better. However, at a worse value, I'm popping it lower in B tier. I still think it's a great mic for the price. I don't know if it is twice as good as the 2020. And I think that at that price point, you start to get to where we are approaching other options like the Lauten or the Aston or the Avantone. So at that price, there's a lot more competition, so it's going to rank a little bit lower. However, it's still a solid microphone. Let's go on. I think we're back to warm audio right here. We have the 251. This mic is $900. I think out of all the warms, I think it might sound the best. However, at $900, there's so many other microphones that you could get. You could start getting Neumanns, you could start getting more expensive Lautens, you could start getting some of the Telefunken stuff that's lower end. I'm going to rank this mic at the bottom of, I'm going to rank it in the mid, I'm going to do bottom of C. I think for $900, the build quality and the quality control is not always there. I think that the mic technically sounds fine. Maybe I'm just a bit jaded on warm in general. I probably wouldn't spend $900 on it, if I'm honest. Like, I know it's crazy to say, but if you're looking for a 251 clone, I think that you could go with something like a smaller developer or save up a little bit more money and get something like the Bach. I know it's $4,000 opposed to $1,000. However, the difference between these is a night and day difference. And then the difference between these is marginal. I don't think that this is really getting close to a 251, very similar to what the Warm 8000 to the Sony C800 comparison was, where it's bright, but it's not as smooth. It's a little bit more muddy in the lows. It's not nearly as open in the mid-range. Same thing is happening on the 251, which is kind of the opposite of what that microphone is supposed to do. So let's move on. The next one is the Slate ML1. I believe that this is the new version that they have. I believe this is the ML1, what are they calling this? A? So this mic is $500. I think that out of all of the model microphones, I think that the ML1 is super versatile. I used to use it a ton, specifically with the 251 and the C800 modules inside of VMR. I think that you could probably find a used ML1 for like $200, and if that's the case, I'm putting that in A tier. For $200, it is so versatile. The sound quality is great. Build quality is kind of fine. But at $500, I think we're going towards the B tier. I think that what really raises this in the ranks is that it is so versatile. You can do a U47, a U87, a 251, a C800, an SM7B. However, it's not going to sound exactly like any of those mics. It's really, to me, just doing like EQ and saturation curves. But if you want a mic that you can just pop on, you can swap between different models, and you can kind of have on a ton of different sources, I think for $500, it is kind of a no-brainer microphone. But it is a little bit bright in the top end. It can get sibilant. The lows can be a little bit cluttered and clouded. So it's not my favorite for quality, but for versatility, it's pretty unmatched. You also have something like the Universal Audio Sphere. It's doing a very, very similar thing. It has its own modeling software. It has all of its own modeled microphones. I believe in this one, you can even do things like change the polar pattern and do like proximity effect stuff after the fact. However, at $1,500, I don't think it sounds that great. I actually prefer the sound of the Slate on most of the models, and for the Slate to be a third or a fourth of the price, I would rather you just go ahead and buy that. At $1,500, it's getting pretty steep. You could probably just buy two really good microphones and have different options, or you could buy one really, really good microphone and not need to have the modeling software. So the Sphere is going down here in C tier. Let's keep on moving. We have a Neumann. I can't see from the picture. It's really small. This looks like the 102. So this mic is $750. I think that this is a lot of people's second microphone. A lot of people enter with something like a Rode or an Aston or an Avantone, and then eventually they will upgrade to something like the Neumann 102. I think that the mic is a little bit bright. I think that at $750, you're probably better off getting something like the Lauten LA320, or you're probably even better off getting something like, honestly, I'd probably even pick the 220 since they're both non-tube microphones. At $750, I don't know if it doesn't really sound like a Neumann to me. I understand that it has a Neumann badge, but I am going to put this in C tier. And you'll see some Neumanns that rank much, much higher later. But for me, $750, it's a microphone that I think has great marketing. I think a lot of people are excited to get into the Neumann brand, but it's pretty bright. Like, it does not sound anything like a lot of the Neumanns that we'll talk about on here, even the 103. So I'm going to pop it right there for now. The next microphone that we have is the SM57. I'm also going to rank the SM7b because this ranking is going to depend on this ranking. So we'll start with the SM7b. I'm going to rank this microphone for a vocal mic in the D tier. I understand that a lot of people love it. I understand that a lot of people use it a ton. I have 2 or 3 SM7Bs. I actually love them on hi-hats. I love them on guitar cabinets. I think that they are solid for something like vocal dialogue. However, for a vocal mic, I don't love them. I think that they're clouded. I think that the mid-range is awful. I think that the top end is so bright and also dull at the same time. It is the weirdest sonic signature to a microphone. I don't understand how it's captured so much attention. I understand that a lot of people love it for noisy environments or whatever, but you could get something like a 208. You could get something like an SM57. For $450, this mic does not sound like a $450 mic. What I would say is just go ahead and get an SM57 for $100. And to be honest, they sound almost identical. And because it's only $100, I'm popping that at the top of C tier. I don't think it's a good sounding mic for vocals, but I think if you are extremely, extremely limited on budget, I think that for $100, like, I don't think it hurts. I think it is much more versatile than something like the MXL because you can use it on guitar cabinets, you can use it on snare drums, you can use it on acoustic. So for me, I say skip the SM7B. If you want it, just get an SM57, maybe run it through a really nice preamp, and I think you're fine. Let's move on. I've already talked a ton about these two microphones in our channel before, but the AKG 214, they're charging $450. I'm probably ranking this in the middle of C tier. I don't know. Like, I just don't think I like the AKG signature. I like a C12 or something like that, but like the 214 and the 414 that we'll talk about in a second, I don't really love them. I find them extremely bright. I think that the mid-range is kind of weird. They have this weird like high mid frequency that I don't like in most voices. I end up having to really, really cut them. And at $450, I think that you'd be better off getting basically any mic in this tier. I think all of these mics are right around that price. I think that you'd be better off upping your budget and getting a 320, decreasing your budget and getting a 220. I don't really like the AKG 214, and even more so, I don't really like the AKG 414, and it's $1,300. So I'm actually going to rank that down here. I will say I think that they are beautiful on acoustic guitars, and I think that as drum overheads, they are incredible. I think having a set of these to use as room mics or overhead mics, that's amazing. For a vocal mic, I hate them. I hate them for female vocals. I hate them for male vocals. I hate them for spoken word dialogue. And at $1,300, you could literally get 3 of these microphones in this tier and have different options. So that's where I'm putting the AKG 414. All right, so here we have the Neumann U87. This mic is almost $4,000, and I might get some hate for this. I think that the mic sounds fine. To me, this is about as standard as a microphone can sound. They're slightly dark. I think that the high mids can get kind of honky and nasally. I like them okay for rap. I use them a lot for pop. I get sent a ton of vocals tracked on U87s. But at $4,000, I'm probably ranking this at the top of B. I think it is a clean microphone. I think it works on most sources. However, at $4,000, I would rather use a Ref C. I would rather use a Bach 251. I would rather use some mics that we're going to talk about right down here in a second. I think for $4,000, not my favorite. I would actually probably go for this Neumann. This is the Neumann M149. This mic is expensive. This mic is $6,000. However, it sounds beautiful. I've had the opportunity to mix a couple vocals tracked on this. I know a couple engineers that use this mic regularly. And for this mic, I'm popping this in A tier. I'll pop it right here at the top of A tier. At $6,000, it is a massive investment. But now we are getting to that Neumann sonic signature sound. This is where you start to introduce some tubes. So you're starting to get that kind of Neumann warmth. You're getting that depth. You're getting that detail. At $6,000, it's a wild investment. You might want to definitely test this out versus other options. Test it out versus a U87. Test it out versus, a 251 or at least a Bach 251. Test it against a Ref C. But it is a gorgeous microphone. I love it a lot. I think it's probably Neumann's most underrated mic, but at $6,000, it kind of sits in a weird market gap. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Neumann TLM 103. So this is kind of the big brother to the 102 that we talked about just a minute ago. The 103 is basically, it's kind of like their entry level. I believe this is an FET mic. I've used this mic a ton. At $1,250, I think it's a solid mic. I think it does sound a lot better than the 102. I think it is substantially better. At $1,300, though, it is steep. I think that there's probably other mics in that price range that you get better value out of. So for me, I might pop it in the middle of B tier here. Actually, I might pop it in the bottom of A tier because at $1,500, I think you are starting to get to having a microphone that is versatile. It sounds great on most vocals. You can use it in most genres. I think it's a workhorse. I think that it doesn't have anything really, really like stand out about the sonic quality, but maybe that's what you want. Maybe you just want a workhorse mic at $1,500. I think go for it. The next one that we're going to talk about, what is this one down here? All right, so since I had the picture swapped earlier, I'm going to pull this back down. I am going to drag the 87 up here. I already talked about it, but this is the U67 from Neumann. The pictures are so small, it's really hard for me to see. I think that the U67 is one of the most iconic microphones of all time. It's their tube mic. I think at $7,000, you're going to see this in most professional studios as kind of a third option to something like a 251 or a C800. I think that it's doing something that's a little bit darker. I think that it's definitely more mid-forward than both of these microphones. And it's a bit smoother than something like a U87. So the 67 to me, it's not as dark as something like a U47 that we'll talk about in just a second, but I think it is a super, super versatile mic. At $7,000, it's really pricey. However, I mean, it's an A-tier microphone. You really can't deny that it's iconic. You can't deny that on most vocals and most voices, it does sound pretty excellent. So I'm going to pop it right there for now. Normally at a major studio, you're going to see one of these three mics always set up. The next one that we're going to talk about, this is the Telefunken. What are they calling this one? I believe it is the TF29. Telefunken has kind of a budget range, and it's a tube microphone. I think that Telefunken is super known for their tubes. At $1,500, I feel like what's hard with a legacy brand like Telefunken and Neumann is that when you have microphones that are $10,000 plus, and then you have budget lines like the TLM line or this TF line from Telefunken, you're not going to obviously get the same exact mic as you would expect from a 251. You're paying an eighth of the price. However, I think that for $1,500, if you take the expectations of it being a Telefunken away, I think it's a great microphone. I think that at $1,500, this is a really, really solid choice. I would probably rank this, I'd probably rank it right here. I'd probably rank it right here, actually. I think for the value, it is a good kind of mid-level tube microphone. I do prefer it to something like a TLM 103. I do prefer it to something like something like a U87 down here. On a voice that the TF29 works on, I think it works really, really good. Since it is a tube microphone, I think that it's a little bit softer to the ears. It's a little bit slower with its transient response. It's a great microphone. It does not sound like a Telefunken 251. It does not sound like a U47, but that's totally fine. I don't think that we're really expecting that for the price. Speaking of, here is the Telefunken U47. This mic is $10,000. I will say, this is kind of, I talked about the U67 right here being like kind of the top tier microphone for like mid-range vocalists. I think that the U47 is a bit dark for what I do a lot of the time with pop music. However, it sounds amazing on female vocals. On folk records, it's beautiful. On country records, it's beautiful. On if you have the opportunity to use this on a drum kit, it's absolutely incredible. To me, a U47 is kind of what you would picture in your head if you picture a beautiful, warm, darker kind of vintage tube microphone. And I am going to put it in the A tier or the S tier. I'm going to put it at the bottom. I think that if you had these three microphones, you would basically be able to capture every source in the world. You would have a darker kind of warmy vintage mic. You'd have a mic that is bright but can kind of lean one way or the other, and then you'd have your ultra bright, ultra processed mic. I understand it's insane to have basically $40,000 of microphones in the S tier, but there's a reason that these mics cost this much. And the U47 to me is the only mic that can lean dark without it getting boomy, without it getting really resonant and dark and disgusting. So for that, I think that it does earn the S tier. It's a gorgeous mic. You'll hear it all over the radio. Anything by Telefunken in this kind of range is going to be insane. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Lewitt. So I'm actually going to pop all of these together so I can just talk about them as a series. So you have the 240, the 440, the 540, and then the 1040. So there's a huge jump here, but in all three of these, I think that Lewitt does a really, really good job of making microphones that kind of span budgets. I think that the 240 at $139, this actually is probably my first pick of under $200. So I'm actually going to pop this in A tier. I think that this mic sounds great for the price. If you want a little bit of an upgrade, you could go to something like the Lewitt 440 at $300. I think that there is a significant upgrade in the quality of the mic. I'd probably still go for the Lauten Audio 220 above it, but I think that if you're going for that sub $500 range, get one of these two microphones. Get the Lewitt 440 or the Lauten 320 or 220, excuse me. The 540 I've used much less. I think that the 540, it kind of at $800 starts to have a bit more competition. I don't think that it offers that much more than something like the 440. So for this one, I'm actually probably sliding it all the way back to B, because at this range, you could go ahead and you could get something like the Slate microphone and have modeling options. You could go ahead and start getting something like the 320 and actually having a tube microphone. You could, even if you wanted something like a 102, you could go that route. At $800, there's a lot of options on the market, and I don't think that it's doing enough to make it that much better than something like a 440. And then we have their flagship microphone. This is the 1040. I actually have this mic in the studio. I use it quite a bit. And this mic, I'm going to say this goes to A tier. And it's going to A tier because not only does it sound incredible, but it is extremely versatile. This microphone comes with a controller, so you can set it between a tube mic or an FET mic, and you can have the tube kind of dial into being warm or saturated or bright or clean. It has a ton of different filter options. I think that this microphone, I have whole videos on it, but you could turn this one, $3,500 mic into 10 or 12 different microphones. So for that reason, I think at its price range, would put it above the Neumann U87. I think if you're going to spend $3,500, you can get a lot more options with something like this. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the Neumann U67. Again, I still can't see this. I still think I'll probably put it above. It's half the price. You can do a ton of options, which kind of takes me into the last two mics. These are both Lauten mics, and similar to that Lewitt 1040, these both have different voicing options. Not nearly as many, but on the Eden and the Atlantis, you have options to put the mic in forward, neutral, or gentle, and it kind of changes the way that the microphone reacts. So I have the Eden, which is a tube microphone. It's $3,500, and on forward, you can kind of start to get that 251 vibe. On neutral, you can kind of get that U67 vibe, and then on gentle, you can kind of get that U47 vibe. And so for that reason, I'm actually going to pop this in A tier, and I'm even going to pop it above the U47 just because of its versatility. I think that the top end is still not as smooth as something like a 251 or a C800, but out of every other microphone on this list, if I didn't have $10,000 for a vocal mic, I'm getting this one. I think it is extremely versatile, and I think that all of the voices do sound a little bit cleaner and a little bit more warm and a little bit more detailed than something like the Lewitt 1040. And then if you don't prefer tubes, they have the FET option, which is the Atlantis. It is a much more affordable microphone because it's not a tube mic. And for that reason, I'm actually going to pop this one at the top of A tier. So again, I prefer tube mics, so I am going to pop it below the Lewitt 1040. But at like $1,700-$1,800, you basically get three microphones in one. I do think that all of the mics sound better than something like the Neumann 103. I think that they sound better than even like this Telefunken TF29. I think that they sound better than something like this JZ Black Hole down here. So I know the budgets ranged a lot. I know we talked about a ton of microphones. This has been a super, super, super long tier list. But if I missed any mics, let me know down below. If you like this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We do videos like this every single Friday. If there are any mics that you want me to talk about in the future, let me know. If there are any mics that you want me to shoot out, let me know. Again, I'm sure a lot of you will have questions. I'm sure a lot of you will have rebuttals to why my opinion was wrong. But if you want to let me know, you can do that all in the comments down below. I'll be back next Friday with another video. And until then, much love. Peace.